Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We're currently in Module 10. In this lesson, we're going to answer the question, how do I grow as a developer? So your growth, like I've said before, your growth is your responsibility. But how do you grow as a developer? Is it just I watch more training videos and because of that I grow? Is it I go to conferences? Is it I read books? How do I grow as a developer? And I've really narrowed it down to two ways of growing as a developer. And there's a lot of pushback on that. But I have found that to really grow as a developer, there's only two ways. So the first way is practice. Practice is the first way you grow. So here's a really controversial statement coming from a guy who does training videos. But watching training is not growth. Okay? Now, it may teach you things. It really should teach you things that you don't know. But that's not really growth. Growth happens when you do it. So watching training videos, going to conferences, reading books, that's all preparation for growth. And you need to do that. But you're preparing for growth. You're not actually growing. You grow when you verify you know how to do something. When you get that muscle memory of actually doing it. So I saw it done on YouTube or I saw it at a conference. Have you actually tried it? Because I've also seen those same developers try it and fail. Because there's a lot of subtleties with development. There's a lot of little things that you might miss or that are different about your environment or whatever the case may be. But that practice is essential for truly understanding how something works. So figure it out by practicing it. Actually do the work. Okay? And again, I understand this means your growth won't be fast. It is what it is. I've had people tell me they love my videos and they just watched, 6, 7, 8 in a row. That's great. You prepared to grow in a lot of areas and maybe it filled in some blanks for you that you didn't know. How many of you practiced? How many could you actually do if I asked you to do it right now? That is a true element of growth, is that ability to get the job done. Not the you grow. Because I really find there only is two ways. The other way is to teach. And again, this may be hard. Because you may say, whoa, Tim, I'm not ready for teaching. If I'm trying to grow as a developer, how can I possibly? I taught C# in the classroom for, I think, 5 or 6 years. And one of the things when I started off that I challenged myself to was I was going to answer any question that was asked. Now, sometimes I would answer that question with, we'll talk about that at a break, or we'll talk about that afterwards because it's kind of off topic. But I would still talk about it. I would still cover it. And if I had to, if I didn't understand a topic, I wouldn't fake it because that's just wrong. Don't teach what you don't know. I had to answer the questions for myself first. I had to ask myself the questions. And so I started anticipating the questions that he asked. That way, when I was asked those questions, I'd already covered that or I had prepared for that. And it actually changed how I taught because I'd start to teach the answers before you even had to ask the questions. Because I started to put myself in that mindset of what did I not know when I came into this? So when I first started learning C Sharp, what was I feeling? What did I think? And one of the things was, okay, when it came to WinForm development, I said, what do early WinForm developers, what do they not know? They know nothing probably of object-oriented programming or events. And so when it comes to dragging a button on a screen, work involves weeks of explanation. And so I changed how I taught in order to teach things in the correct order so that when they asked that question, we'd already covered the answer. So I'd already anticipated the question and answered that in my content. And by doing it that way, I became a better developer. I had a better understanding of those things that I just kind of accepted as they work. For a long time, I just accepted that events worked. They work. Okay? So why do I need to know how they work? Well, because then you can create your own events. Because then you understand how a delegate works. Because then you can do other things with delegates besides just events. These are the things I hadn't thought about. Generics. I hadn't thought about why generics works. Well, when you think about generics and how they work, then you can use them. You can create your own, and they can be really powerful. Well, that comes from teaching the material and going, why is it T? What does T do? And where does it come from? Okay? By answering those questions ahead of time, I became a better developer. And so teaching pushed me to do that. So with that, so you got the practice and then you got the teaching. And sometimes those go hand in hand. Practice and then teach it, and practice and teach it, and practice and teach it. Because that will deepen your knowledge and it will push you to learn more than you might have even done in just your practice. That doesn't mean you have to get in front of a room of 200 or 300 people and tell them how to do something. That's not the only way to teach something. You can teach with a blog post. So if you write a small blog post where you say, this is how you do an if statement, and here are the because that's, first of all, plagiarism. Don't do that. Don't just link to somebody's content and say, well, I learned it here, so you go learn it there too. Because you'll probably find that there's pieces missing, things that you didn't know that you had to figure out. So document in your own way of documenting it, your own thought process, your own questions that you went through and how to answer those. And if you document that into a blog post, someone else will benefit from that. One of the first real forays I did into sharing my knowledge, into teaching in a public setting, because I'd done it privately for a while, but in a public setting, was I wrote an article on Log4Net. And it really was just, I didn't know how to use Log4Net. And I spent a week at the kitchen table with a printout of all the documentation, and I said, I'm going to learn this. Place to share different things you've learned. It's kind of like one big blog that everyone can post to. And so I did. Log4Net documents on the web. I mean, It's had millions of views. It's still, if you search for Log4Net tutorial, people. Now, I had no clue it would be that valuable. Log4Net is one logging system, and probably not even the most popular logging system. And it's for C# only. So this is not even like it's for any language. So now you've got C#, which is a smaller slice of an overall pie of different development languages. And then inside that slice, we've got a small slice that is one logging framework, which you might not even use a logging framework, but one logging framework out of a number of them. And so I thought, well, who would ever benefit from this? Millions of people. And that's not to brag about, oh, that's awesome. But I have written things that a dozen people have read, okay? Not everyone wanted to know that knowledge. But you know what that is? That's a dozen people I've helped. And it also helped me. So I have gained a benefit from writing that Log4Net article. I have gained a benefit from writing other articles that were nowhere near as popular. So I didn't lose anything by writing those articles. Benefit as well, which goes back to portfolio, because now I can put that in my portfolio and say, hey, I have written documentation that has helped X number of people. But I can also put that as work that I've done. So I know how to use Log4Net because I documented all of it and I really dug into how to use it. So now if you need to use Log4Net, here's the tutorial on how to do that. So I have demonstrated my ability to use that product. So by teaching it, I can show others my knowledge and I can help others. And at the same time, I'm doing it to help my growth, to make me a better developer. I have a YouTube channel with hundreds of videos. Do you know the primary purpose for this YouTube video? Those YouTube videos is to help me remember. Okay, so I go back and watch my own videos because I can't remember all this all the time. So just because I taught it doesn't mean I remember it long term. There may be times when I have to and I refresh my brain on what I taught, and now I can relearn much more quickly. Okay, so teaching is very effective, and it doesn't have to be in front of a major audience. It can be a blog. It could be even a tweet where you said, hey, did you know that you can do control dot on an element in C# and get the quick action refactorings? That's all you need. You know, a little picture. And then all of a sudden you might have helped somebody else, but you've also taught it just a little bit. Okay? Now, there can also be YouTube videos. There can be even conference talks. You can submit to a lot of conferences. Will take even new speakers. And if you learn a topic, maybe a bigger topic, maybe like you learn Blazor client side. And so you've learned it and you've started to work with it and you're not an expert, but you know some things about it. You can share that in a talk. And a lot of conferences will consider you. And a lot of conferences will take you even as a brand new speaker and even as not a person that has perfected their knowledge. Just be clear about that. Be clear about what you know and what you don't know. When a person asks you a question, try to anticipate those questions. But if you don't know, say, I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet. In fact, I had a conference earlier this past year where they asked me a question and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And it's no big deal, okay? I can't know everything, and it's okay. But what I can do is share what I do know. And through that, I become a better developer because I grow and stretch my skills. And you become a better developer because you learn from my easier way of learning it. Okay, so I've taken the different pieces and I said, okay, that's kind of hard to learn. I'll make it a little easier. And now you learn it, and maybe you take that knowledge, and then you can make it even easier for somebody else. So it can be a ripple down effect. Okay, and it all starts with you just want to learn this more deeply. All right, so the pro tip is practice is often overlooked, but fight that urge. Practice is important. Practice is imperative. So whether it be practice or teaching, both involve practice. And that's kind of the subtle thing about teaching. Teaching is actually just deeper practice. Because teaching, you have to come up with a very clear way of explaining something. And so you have to take away all the extra stuff that doesn't really apply and focus in on this one thing and know the ins and outs and know how it works and have a deeper understanding so you can ask or be asked some questions and practice what I'm going to teach. I practice it multiple times. I try different things out, and even still, things pop up live on camera. I'm like, I don't know why that did that. Let's figure it out. And I do it right on camera. And the reason why is I show them a real person, and this really happens in the real world, even after practice. And it grows my skill at developing and debugging on screen with an audience. And it also teaches the audience how to debug a problem when it arises. And so I'm still teaching. Okay, fight that urge to overlook practice. I often hear from new developers who they ask me, well, how do I become a senior developer? How do I become a senior developer? I really want to be a senior developer. And I tell them, practice everything you learn. 2 to 5 test projects for everything you learn. Just create a very simple little project that just tests that piece. The key is it does not have to do anything real. Okay? It just has to test whatever you've learned. Everything else should be fake. Just make it test that one thing you've learned. Do that 2 to 5 times. Then integrate it into a little bit bigger project. Okay? Something that is, takes you a few hours to develop. Not a real project. By real project, I mean a project that actually they kind of walk away and they're like, I'll just watch more videos. That's not going to be the help you need. Because if they ask for 3 to 5 years of work experience, what they're really asking for is 3 to 5 years of practice. If that's the first time you've used the technology, you're going to be up a creek. You're going to have some problems. Because if you put something in wrong and it goes to production, my goodness, you have to back that out or you have to fix it live. That could be a major problem. That's not the place to learn. That's the place to implement what you know. And where you learn is through these practice projects. Don't practice in the real world and on real projects. Practice in the test world, in development, in sample projects. I have hundreds of sample projects on my computer, and I delete them every once in a while, where I'm learning different technologies. Do the same thing. It will be hugely beneficial to you. This is what really makes the difference. Practice and then teach. Those are 2 ways to launch yourself forward faster. Okay, So your homework, create a blog post. You don't have to have a blog. There's plenty of places on the web that would take a blog post, just one-off post. Even if you don't even share it, create a post about something you recently learned. Just try it out. You've got to figure out the order to teach it in so it makes sense, so you're not skipping over things. And I will guarantee you that as you go through this process, because you are preparing to teach it. Okay, so create a blog post, identify how to teach it in a logical order. So you may learn from somebody else, but then close those browser tabs, maybe walk away for a little bit, create some practice apps, and then teach it yourself. Teach it in your style. Teach it in the way that is most logical for you. Every person thinks a little differently, has a little different pushback I get a lot is, this stuff's all been taught before. Yeah, it has, but not from you. And again, your voice is different. There is a woman that created a series of posts about things that new developers question new developers ask, or something like that. That was huge, a huge deal, because she came in not knowing a lot about .NET, and so she until you've learned it, it's not obvious. So someone has to ask the question. When they ask the question, then she would research the answer and she would post about it. So she'd have a question, she would write down the question, she'd find out the answer, and then in the community, because she gets it. She understands that you're not born with C# knowledge. So you have to read her 1,000 times. She still has a unique voice, and her way of teaching clicks with people. And so it may not be for everyone, nothing is, but it will help someone. So do that. Help someone, and at the same time, grow your skills as a software developer. So practice and then teach what you've practiced. Those are the two ways to grow as a C# developer.